I used to count the sound of her keys in the lock as the last line of every day, a small metallic promise that whatever happened out there, in the noise and the rush and the city lights, she'd always come back to me. That night, the night everything cracked, the keys didn't come. The apartment felt wider than usual, too much space between the couch and the TV, between my plate and hers on the dining table. I'd cooked her favorite lemon garlic chicken the way she liked it, extra char at the edges. By 8 p.m. it had gone lukewarm. By 9 p.m. cold. She'd texted at 6:47, late meeting tonight. Don't wait up if you're tired. I stared at that heart longer than the words, because by then, if I'm honest, the words were starting to sound like templates, running behind. Caught up. Big project. Different days, same distance. We weren't always like that. A year earlier, she'd send photos from the office, bad coffee in a chipped mug, a coworker's messy whiteboard, the view of the street from the 12th floor. She used to narrate her day like she couldn't wait to get home and finish the story with me. Lately, the only stories she told were short, busy, exhausted. Let's talk tomorrow. The city outside the window hummed like it always did, cars passing, an ambulance siren somewhere far off, a neighbor's TV faint through the wall, but it all felt like static. In here, it was just the clock, and me. I tried to distract myself with work, with a game, with scrolling through videos that all blurred together, but my eyes kept drifting back to her untouched plate, to my phone, to that last message. When the clock hit 10:30, the unease in my chest stopped being vague. It sharpened into something heavy and specific, not panic, not yet, but a cold, rational discomfort, like my body knew something my mind was still refusing to say out loud. I opened our shared calendar. Her team didn't usually schedule meetings past 7. I knew that because for the first few years of our marriage, she'd complain about any meeting that dared trespass into our time. That was what she'd call it. Tell them no, babe, I'd say, half joking, and she'd roll her eyes and text her boss some version of that. No such complaints lately. I checked her location. We'd shared that by mutual agreement after I got into a minor accident a couple of years back. Nothing controlling, nothing dramatic, just safety, trust. The dot wasn't at her office. It was across town, in a part of the city we never had any reason to be in. At first I told myself it was a glitch. Maps bug out, signals bounce. Satellites fail, I refreshed. Same spot, same little blue circle pulsing slow and calm like it wasn't rewriting the last 6 months of my life. I zoomed in. A street I didn't know, a building number that meant nothing to me. Just an anonymous gray square surrounded by other anonymous gray squares. My heart started beating too fast for how quiet everything was. For a second, I considered calling her, but I could already hear the script in my head. Hey, where are you? At the office, we're just wrapping up. Oh, that's weird, your location says. Oh, my phone must be bugging again. Yeah, must be. The words tasted stale before they were even spoken. Instead, I did something small. Almost stupid. I went to the sink, picked up her fork, and washed it, just to do something with my hands that didn't involve shaking. The door finally opened at 11:12. Her keys jingled the way they always did, the old metallic promise sliding back into the lock as if it had never broken. But she walked in smiling, not tired, not drained. Not like someone who just survived a brutal late-night meeting. It was a light, soft smile, almost afterglow. Her hair was a little messy in the back, like fingers had been there. Her lipstick was mostly gone, but there was a faint smudge at the edge that didn't look accidental. Hey, she said, dropping her bag on the side table, like it was any other night. Like my chest wasn't burning with questions I was afraid to ask. I saw everything at once, in one impossible second. The late nights, the sudden gym membership, the new perfume she said a friend recommended. The way her phone stopped living face up on the coffee table and started living face down on silent. Long meeting, I asked. My voice sounded calm, detached, even, like we were two strangers practicing small talk. She nodded, that same soft smile not fully leaving her face, even as she added a quick, rehearsed sigh. You have no idea, she said. She avoided my eyes just a fraction too long. I did not explode. I did not accuse. I did not shout. I walked slowly to the table, picked up my phone, and turned the screen toward her. Her location, that anonymous gray square, the timestamp. Your office moved, I asked, quietly. The smile disappeared like someone flipped a switch. Her mouth parted, but nothing came out. Just the sound of the city bleeding through the closed windows. For the first time in months, there was no script between us, only silence. And in that silence, everything finally collapsed. Fade out on her face, caught between guilt and fear, as she opens her mouth to speak. But all that comes out is my name and nothing else. She slept on the couch that night. Not because I told her to, Because after an hour of sitting at opposite ends of the bed, not touching, barely breathing, she just got up, took her pillow, and left the room without looking back. The door didn't slam. She didn't cry, not where I could hear it, just soft footsteps down the hallway, the sound of the couch creaking under her weight, then nothing. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the faint orange glow from the streetlights drawing prison bars across the plaster. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that gray square on the map. Maybe that street, maybe that building, maybe a door opening for her the way our door used to. We talked after I showed her the phone, if you could call it talking. Words came out, but they bounced off walls and fell between us like broken glass. It's not what you think, she'd tried first. Then when I stayed quiet, okay, it's complicated. Complicated. She used that word about tax forms and office politics, not about vows. How long? I had asked. Finally, she'd swallowed, looked past me at the kitchen, the sink, anywhere but my eyes. A few months. The truth sounded small. Somehow that made it worse. Like everything I'd been feeling, the distance, the coldness, the endless, vague meetings had been real. I just hadn't wanted to believe I was right. Is it just one person? I'd asked. Lord. One, she cut in too quickly, as if more would have tipped me into some other category of pain, one she couldn't handle seeing on my face. It's been one. There was a strange, detached admiration, almost, at how efficiently she killed who we used to be with single-syllable answers. What's his name? Daniel. Even his name felt like an intruder in our air. Lying in the dark later, I turned that name over in my head like a sharp stone. Daniel, the man who knew the smell of her new perfume before I did. The man who had probably seen that smile more often these past months than I had. The night stretched on without mercy. Sleep was something that happened to other people, in other apartments, in lives that still made sense. I thought of getting up, of going to the living room, of shaking her awake and demanding explanations she clearly didn't want to give yet. But every time I pictured her looking at me with that mixture of pity and guilt, my body froze. Instead, I got up alone, walked through the apartment in the semi-dark. The dining table still had both plates on it, our ghost dinner sitting between us, untouched and accusing. Her wine glass had a perfectly round lipstick mark on the rim from the last time we'd actually sat there and talked. I traced it with my thumb. On the chair beside the table was her work blazer, draped carelessly. I lifted it. Her perfume wrapped around me, familiar and yet not. Underneath it, faint but undeniable, there was another scent. Cologne, not mine. I stood there, holding the jacket, the weight of it suddenly more than fabric. I wanted to throw it, tear it, do something dramatic like in movies. But reality isn't scored with violins. It's just breath and choices. I hung the blazer neatly on the back of the chair instead. One small, stupid act of care in a room that no longer deserved it. By morning, the city looked washed out behind the curtains, the sky a dull gray, rain tapping lightly against the glass. Of course it was raining. It was like the weather had finally given up pretending for us too. She was still on the couch when I walked out, curled into herself, blanket pulled up to her chin, eyes open. I could tell she hadn't slept either. Morning, I said. It came out rough. She flinched at the word like it was too normal for what we'd become overnight. Hey, she whispered. We moved around each other in the kitchen like strangers at a shared sink. I filled the kettle. She reached for a mug, then stopped halfway, hand hovering in the air. I'll go, she said suddenly. I'll stay at my sister's for a while. You need space. Space, the word she'd used when she said she couldn't make it to my parents' anniversary dinner. When she'd canceled date nights because work's just a lot right now. Now it was the bandage she wanted to slap over the wound she'd made. You'll go to your sister's, I repeated. Not to him. The question landed between us with a dull thud. She closed her eyes for a second. No, she said, it's over. Did you end it because you got caught? I asked quietly, or because you wanted to? Her silence answered before her mouth did. We didn't talk more that morning. She packed a small bag, toothbrush, a few changes of clothes, her charger, not her wedding ring. That stayed on her finger, a bright, shameless circle that suddenly looked like a lie we were both still telling. At the door she paused, the same doorway where we'd kissed 1,000 quick goodbyes, where we'd stumbled in laughing from late-night movies and drunk walks home. Are you going to tell anyone? She asked, voice barely audible over the rain and distant traffic. Your parents, your friends. I don't know yet, I said. Maybe I'll start with myself. She winced, and then she was gone, leaving a vacuum of sound behind her that swallowed the whole apartment. The days that followed blurred together, but each had its own texture of emptiness. Her side of the bed, cold and smooth, her toothbrush still in the holder, half of her shoes neatly lined up by the door, pointing nowhere. At night, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling again, except this time there was no soft breathing beside me to sink my lungs to, just the buzz of the fridge, the occasional car outside, the ticking of the clock that had been a wedding gift. I started noticing small things I'd never paid attention to when life was full. The squeak in the hallway floorboard, the way the bathroom door didn't quite close unless you pulled it firmly, the humming of the pipes when the upstairs neighbor showered. The world goes on pouring out details, even when you feel like your life has stopped. Her messages came in sporadically, short, awkward, hope you're eating. Let me know if you need anything. I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve this. I typed long replies I never sent, then short ones I also didn't send. Most of the time, the message bubble stayed empty. One night, though, I broke. I scrolled through our old photos and stopped at one from 2 years ago. We were on a park bench, coffee in hand, her head on my shoulder, both of us squinting into the winter sun and laughing at something I can't even remember now. I stared at it until my vision blurred, and then I did it. I searched his name. Daniel plus her firm, a LinkedIn profile, professional headshot, friendly enough smile, open collar, confident posture. I'd never met him, but I knew things I hadn't asked to know. Years of experience, schools he attended, skills endorsements, little green icons telling the world he was reliable, trustworthy, accomplished. I hated him for having a normal, boring, publicly respectable life while having detonated mine in private. I hated myself more for clicking through his resume like it would somehow explain why she'd chosen him over what we had. One line caught my eye: volunteer work at a local shelter. I laughed out loud, a rough, humorless sound that didn't sound like it belonged to me. I closed the laptop, walked to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. My reflection looked older than I remembered, a little thinner, eyes darker. There was a time I thought I knew what version of me she loved. Now I wasn't sure she'd even see me if we passed on the street. At some point in that month of half-sleeps and ghost dinners, something inside me shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, something quieter, a thin thread of resolve pulling me away from the wreckage. It started with small acts. I moved her shoes into the closet, boxed up some of her things from the bathroom, and set them gently on her side of the wardrobe, cooked for one without pretending it was temporary. Each little movement away from us hurt. But each one also felt like reclaiming an inch of floor in a house that had become a museum of what used to be. While I was learning how to live in the ruins, she was figuring something out too. Because 4 weeks after she left, after a month of scattered apologies and unanswered messages, she texted me one line that made my chest tighten all over again. I need to talk to you. In person. I stared at those words for a long time, then I typed back the only reply that felt honest. Come by tomorrow at 7. I put the phone down, looked around the apartment, at the quiet furniture, at the empty chair across from mine at the table. If she was coming back into this space, even just for a conversation, I realized I didn't want to be the only one surprised. And that was when the idea for the nasty surprise began to form, slowly, carefully, like a storm gathering just beyond the horizon. The day she was due to come back, the city woke up under low clouds. The kind that sat heavy over the buildings, pressing everything down into a muted, colorless calm. It fit. I spent the afternoon cleaning, not a nervous, frantic kind of cleaning, methodical, intentional. Wiping down surfaces like I was erasing fingerprints from a scene that had already been investigated and closed. I set the table for two, not with candles or wine or any of the cliched romance leftovers from our old life. Just plain white plates, 2 glasses of water, cutlery aligned with deliberate precision. On her plate, instead of food, I placed a thin manila folder, closed, light, inconspicuous. Inside were printouts, screenshots. Her location history, phone records from our shared account, a few carefully chosen photographs from her social media, side by side with timestamps that didn't match her stories. I wasn't planning to scream. I wasn't planning to cry. I wanted her to sit down in front of her own trail of breadcrumbs and realize that I had walked every step behind her, silently. On my plate, I put a single envelope, her name written on it in my handwriting. Inside, a printed email draft, addressed to her parents, to mine, to a couple of our mutual friends. Subject line, why we're separating. I wasn't sure if I was going to send it, but I wanted her to see that version of the future sitting there, solid and real, as easy to pick up as a fork. By 6:45, everything was ready. The apartment smelled faintly of cleaning spray and the coffee I'd made hours earlier and left untouched. Rain had started again, soft at first, like hesitant fingers on the windows. I sat in my chair at the table, hands folded, breathing steady. When her keys turned in the lock at exactly 7:03, something in my chest clenched in a way that was both familiar and foreign. The sound of those keys had been a comfort once. Now it was just information. She was here. She stepped inside, closing the door gently. No smile this time, no afterglow. Just a pale, tired face, hair pulled back in a loose knot, eyes carrying weeks of bad sleep. "Hey," she said softly. "Hi," I replied. My voice surprised me with how even it sounded. Her gaze flicked over the room, taking in the neatness, the table set for two. Her eyes lingered on the folder resting on her plate. I saw the moment she recognized the shape of it, somewhere between paperwork and consequences. "You cleaned," she said, like she needed to comment on something ordinary before we got to the real reason she was here. "Yeah," I answered. "It helps." We stood in the shallow space between the door and the table for a moment, the air thick with everything unspoken. "Do you want something to drink?" I asked. "Water's fine," she said. I gestured to the glasses already waiting. Her throat tightened. "I guess you expected I'd say yes," she murmured. "I've gotten better at reading things," I said. She flinched at that just slightly. We sat, our usual spots. The muscle memory of 1,000 dinners tried to drag us back into old rhythms, but there was a new hard edge to everything now. Her eyes drifted again to the folder by her hand. "What's that?" she asked. "Your plate," I said. "Go ahead, it's all yours." Her fingers hesitated at the edge before she opened it. The first page was a printout of that location screenshot from the night I found out. The little blue dot, the gray square, the timestamp. She stared at it for a long time, lips pressed together. Then she turned the page. More dots, more squares. "Different nights, same story. You've been tracking me," she said eventually, voice low. "We shared locations," I reminded her. "I just finally looked." She swallowed, turned another page. Phone records this time, calls to the same number. "Late nights, early mornings. His number?" she asked, though she already knew. "Daniels," I said, though you had D in your contacts, subtle. A flash of old sarcasm surfaced in my tone, then dissolved. This wasn't about jokes. She closed the folder slowly, as if half hoping the pages might rearrange themselves into something less damning if she moved gently enough. "What is this exactly?" she asked, finally meeting my eyes. "Evidence." "In a way," I said. "It's context for me, for what happens next." Her gaze flicked to the envelope on my plate, and that. "Draft of an email," I said, "to our families, a couple of friends, explaining why our marriage ended." Her shoulders tensed. "Are you sending it?" "I don't know," I replied. "That's sort of what tonight is about." She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, just diminished, like some light had gone out behind her eyes and she was still trying to pretend she could see fine without it. "I ended it," she said suddenly, "with him, a few days after I left. I figured," I answered. "He stopped being fun when he came with consequences." Her jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair," I said quietly. "That's kind of the point." Silence again, rain louder now, a car splashing through a puddle on the street below. "I came because," she stopped, took a breath, started again. "I came because I owe you the truth, all of it. Not just the half version I gave you that night." I leaned back in my chair. "Okay," I said, "talk." She told me, not every detail. I didn't need the geography of their affair mapped out in graphic precision, but enough. How it started as harmless jokes between late meetings. How his attention had felt like a warm room when ours had grown cold. How every line she crossed felt, at first, like something she could still step back from. "I kept telling myself I'd stop," she whispered. "After this week, after this project, after this one more time. And then I'd look at you," she said, eyes shining, "and feel so guilty I didn't know how to be around you anymore. So I'd pull away, which just made it harder to come back, easier to escape." To him, I finished. "Yes," she said, "there was a terrible, ugly logic to it. Cowardice, dressed up as confusion. I don't expect you to forgive me," she added. "I don't even know if I deserve for you to listen, but I couldn't just let what we had end with me lying to you for the rest of your life about who I really became." The words hung between us like a damp curtain, part confession, part self-preservation. "What do you want exactly?" I asked, "from tonight?" Her eyes dropped to the table, to the folder, to the email draft. "I want," she began, then stopped, shaking her head. "What I want doesn't matter anymore." "Say it anyway," I said. She took a long, unsteady breath. "I want you to give us another chance," she whispered. "I know how that sounds. I know I have no right to ask, but I also know you. I know your heart, and I know that if I walk out that door today, really walk out, I'm losing the best thing that ever happened to me." There it was, the ask, the hook, the almost plea. "I've started going to therapy," she added quickly, like it was a bonus bullet point in some desperate presentation. "I'm trying to understand why I did this, why I sabotaged the one relationship that was actually safe. I don't want to be this person." Her words were careful, deliberate, and in some twisted way brave. It takes courage to admit you've become someone you don't respect, but courage doesn't erase impact. I looked at her, really looked. At the woman I had loved for years, at the stranger she had become over months, at the broken, trembling person sitting across from me now, asking for mercy from the same hands she'd pushed away. "You know what the worst part is," I said quietly. She swallowed. "What?" "I still love you," I admitted. Her eyes closed as if the words physically hurt. "But I don't trust you. And I don't know who I'm loving anymore." Tears slipped down her cheeks, quiet and steady. She didn't wipe them away. Maybe she thought she deserved to feel them there. "I'll do anything," she whispered. "If it takes years, if you want to separate, if you want me to move out permanently and just try from a distance, I'll do it. I can't live with knowing that I didn't at least try to fix what I broke." I glanced down at the email draft, then at the folder still open beside her. "The surprise," I said slowly, "is that I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to beg. I'm not going to threaten to ruin your life or his. I'm not even going to send that email. Not unless I have to." She looked up, hope flickering through the tears. "So, you're saying there's a chance?" I held her gaze for a long time, long enough for that hope to settle on her face like fragile morning light. And then, with a quiet resolve that surprised even me, I said, "No, I'm saying I'm not going to destroy you. I'm just going to let you live with what you did, without me." Her breath hitched, like I'd hit her and she hadn't seen it coming. "You're leaving," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, you are." Her chair creaked as she leaned back, blinking hard. "For good." I looked around the apartment, at the life threaded through every object, at the ghost of the love we'd built here. "Yes," I said, "for good." The rain outside intensified, drumming harder against the glass. Inside, everything went very still. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. But whatever words she was looking for seemed to have abandoned her at the threshold of this new reality. Finally, she managed a whisper. "What do I do now?" The question was raw, childlike almost. For the first time since she walked in, I didn't have an answer. She moved out 2 weeks later, not in a dramatic flurry of boxes and slammed doors, but in measured trips, a few bags at a time. Each visit was a small surgery, removing another piece of her from the space we once called ours. The first time she came with empty boxes, the air between us was stiff, formal. We didn't talk much. "Is this mine?" "Yeah. This. Yours too." She took the books she'd brought into our life, the sweaters that still smelled like her when I pretended not to notice. The framed photo of us from our wedding day stayed on the shelf until the last round. When she finally reached for it, our fingers brushed. We both pulled back like the glass had shocked us. "You can keep it if you want," she said. Her voice had a strange, distant softness, like she was talking through cotton. "I don't think I should," I replied. She nodded once, placed the frame gently into a box, and didn't look at it again. The night after the final box left, the apartment felt like a hotel room. All the essentials remained: sofa, bed, kitchen table, but the little personal details had been hollowed out. Her candles were gone, her ridiculous collection of mugs with bad puns gone. Her blanket from her grandmother no longer draped over the armchair. The walls seemed to exhale, freed of our history, or maybe just emptied by it. I sat on the bare edge of the couch and listened to the silence. It was different now. Less suffocating, more honest. Her ring had been the last thing she left. She'd placed it on the kitchen counter the day we signed the preliminary separation papers, its metallic ring against the marble echoing much louder than it should have. "I can't wear it," she'd said quietly. "It doesn't feel right." I'd stared at the small, shining circle for a long time after she left. Then I picked it up, turned it over in my fingers, and placed it in the top drawer beside the stove. Not in the trash, not displayed, just out of sight but not erased. Mornings became my anchor. At first, they dragged, heavy with the weight of habit. I'd wake up reaching for a warmth that wasn't there, hand landing on empty sheets that felt colder than the rest of the bed. But slowly, without fanfare, something shifted. I started making coffee for one without that sharp sting in my chest. I opened the windows to let in the pale, gray light, watching the way it gently painted the furniture in soft shadows. The hum of distant traffic stopped sounding like the world rushing past me and started sounding like a reminder that life was still moving, with or without my consent. Sometimes it rained in the early hours, thin lines of water tracing paths down the window pane. I'd stand there, mug in hand, forehead against the cool glass, watching the city blur. The rain no longer felt like the universe mirroring my regret. It was just weather, but in its steady rhythm, there was something comforting. In the quiet, I began to hear my own thoughts more clearly. Not the looping questions: why wasn't I enough? What did he have that I didn't? Those still showed up, but they no longer screamed. They knocked, and sometimes I didn't open the door. I went back to the gym, not to punish myself, but to remember what it felt like to live in my body without tension coiled in every muscle. I met a friend for coffee, and for the first time told someone the whole story. no dramatics. No edited version to protect her image, just the truth. He listened, didn't offer cheap advice or slogans about forgiveness. At the end, he simply said, "You're still here, man, that counts." I thought about that a lot afterward. The simple fact of still being here. One Sunday, months later, I opened the top drawer by the stove. The ring was there, exactly where I'd left it. Time hadn't softened its edges or dulled its shine. It was still beautiful. Still heavy for something so small. I held it in my palm for a long moment. In another life, another version of this story, maybe I would have slid it back onto her finger after a long, tearful reconciliation. Maybe we would have rebuilt brick by patient brick, but that wasn't this life. That wasn't this story. The thing about betrayal is that even if you patch the wall, you always know where the crack runs underneath the paint. You can cover it. You can pretend it's gone. You still know. I opened a small wooden box I kept at the back of the cupboard. It held a few old letters, some ticket stubs, a photo of my dad I didn't want out in the open. I placed the ring inside, closed the lid, and pushed it all the way to the back. Not destroyed, not displayed, archived. That evening, as the sun finally broke through days of clouds, the apartment filled with a soft, almost golden light. I sat at the table, the same table where I'd laid out the folder, the email draft, the evidence of a life coming apart, and noticed how different it felt in this light. The chairs were just chairs now, not empty accusations. On a quiet impulse, I took out my laptop, opened the email draft addressed to our families, read the words again, the calm explanation of what she'd done, the quiet, factual note that we were separating. I hovered over the delete key. Then instead I clicked save as draft, closed it, and walked away. They could know someday, or not. It didn't change what had happened. It didn't change what I'd decided. What surprised me was how little I needed that external validation now. The story had already been written in the spaces between us. The only person who still needed to fully accept it was me. Some nights I still thought of her. Wondered if she was okay, if therapy was helping her find the version of herself that didn't run from good things. If she ever stood in a kitchen somewhere, holding a mug, listening to the rain, thinking of me the way I still, occasionally, thought of her. But the ache was different now, less like an open wound, more like an old scar, a raised line under the skin that only hurt when the weather changed. One morning, months after she'd walked out with the last of her boxes, I woke up before my alarm. The bedroom was filled with a thin, gentle light, not harsh, not dramatic, just kind. I lay there listening, no second heartbeat beside me. No shared rustle of sheets, just my breathing, steady and unhurried. For the first time, the quiet didn't feel like something missing. It felt like something I'd earned. I got up, put on the kettle, opened the window wider than usual, letting the cool air rush in. The city outside was waking up, cars starting, dogs being walked, someone laughing faintly 2 floors down. I took my coffee to the table, sat in my usual chair. The chair across from me stayed empty. And instead of that stabbing me in the chest, I just acknowledged it. Some loves end with doors slamming, plates breaking, voices hoarse from shouting. Ours ended in a folder on a table, a ring in a drawer, and a man learning how to live again in the soft, ordinary light of morning. I thought of the night she came home smiling after her late meeting, of the quiet, careful trap I'd set so she would have to look at what she'd done. I'd wanted to make her regret it, and in a way I had. But somewhere along the way, without quite meaning to, I'd stopped building my life around her regret. I lifted the mug to my lips, watching a thin streak of sunlight land perfectly on the empty chair. For a moment the world held its breath. "I forgive you," I said into the quiet. Not for her, for me. The words didn't change the past. They didn't rewrite the nights or erase the blue dots on the map. But they settled in my chest like a key finally turning in a long-stuck lock. Outside, a cloud shifted. The room brightened just a little more. I took another sip of coffee. The chair across from me stayed empty. And for the first time, that felt like exactly how it was supposed to be.